This is part 3 of the videos on wildflowers of KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa, dealing with species 101 to 151. The first flower featured is a Hermania species. I'm not certain of the specific species here, but the Hermania genus. They are commonly called honey bells or 8-day healing bushes because they are used for healing purposes, from the family Malvaceae. What's characteristic of them is the yellow flowers and the nodding or hanging heads of the flowers. Here we have a beautiful hibiscus, Hibiscus micranthus, which is very, very delicate, and that's a typical, I believe it's called a columella, that arises from the flower, where you have these fused anthers, which you can see there, and they form a column. Very, very pretty and a very characteristic flower of the Malvaceae. Another flower from the Malvaceae is the grape leaf hibiscus, Hibiscus vitifolia. You can see on the right hand picture the leaves are on the bottom right corner there, and you can see how they are kind of grape leaf shaped. This is one of my favorite hibiscus species because it is so distinctive. It has these flower buds that look like a bladder, hence the name bladder hibiscus. It's also called flower of the hour. It's got a very, very pretty structure. You can see there's a very, very dark scent to the flower. A very, very decorative plant. This is a small tree called the small red heart tree, Hymenocardea almoides. It has these winged seeds, and they typically form a heart shape, and they turn a reddish color when they are ripe, hence the name small red heart. They are very characteristic of sort of dry savanna areas, and I have also seen them, I've seen them in the sand forest in KwaZulu-Natal. I've also seen a related species, Hymenocardea acida, in the Congo, from the family Phylanthaceae. This is one of the ribbon bushes, Hypoestes triflora, I believe, from the Acanthaceae. Another ribbon bush species, Hypoestes forscaeoli. Once again, I stand to be corrected. I've tried to identify these as accurately as I can from field guides. This is one of the African potatoes, Hypoxis angustifolia. There's several species. Some of them are used for treatment of cancer. They use the rhizome, and hence the name African potato. And the species typically used for that kind of research is Hypoxis hemerocalidea. From the Fabaceae, one of hundreds of species of indigo bushes, Indigofera schimperi. The indigo bushes have these typical pinkish to violet flowers, compound leaves, and of course the typical leguminous pods that you see in the front there, in the foreground. As the name suggests, of course, it's also used to make the blue indigo dye, which people use to dye a lot of their clothing with. From the Convolvulaceae or morning glory family is a fig leaf morning glory, Apomea fusifolia. You can see it's got this very characteristic leaf, which makes it quite easy to identify, and it has the typical flower of a morning glory, of course. This is an unknown morning glory species. I just simply didn't have the resources to look it up, but it has these auriculate sort of leaf bases, or almost cordate auriculate leaf bases, which is probably quite characteristic, and so I think it would be fairly easy to look it up with the right resources. This is Apomea magnusiana from the Convolvulaceae again. It has palmate leaves, where they're deeply divided palmate leaves. From the Acanthaceae, Isoglossa grantii, the white-flowered Isoglossa. Here you can see a picture close up of the flower structure. Also from the Acanthaceae is Justicia flavor, the yellow Justicia. Typically find this in kind of shaded areas beneath acacia trees, etc., in the hills of Kwazulu-Natal. Also from the Acanthaceae, another Justicia species, Justicia petiolaris. This is a nice succulent. It's a Kalanchoa species, Kalanchoa thiciflora. It's also called the paddle plant. You can see it's got this very tall stem, a greyish kind of tone to the stem, ear-like leaves which are succulent, and then the flower at the top. Chedrostis foetidissima is from the Cucurbitaceae. A lot of the cucurbit family members or cucumber family members are vines. They either grow up small bushes and things, or they are spreading or sprawling on the ground, and they tend to not be very obvious to see unless they are either flowering or fruiting. Here we have Kylinga alba, the button sedge, a very characteristic member of the Cyperaceae or sedge family. Sedges, unlike grasses, have a very square stem. Another family that has square stems is the Lamiaceae or Labiatia, the mint family. This is Kyphocarpa angustifolia from the Amaranthaceae. A lot of Amaranthaceae species are edible as vegetables, cooked vegetables. They make a kind of spinach or marroch, and they are highly nutritious. In fact, my mom grows some in her garden, and we eat that all the time. Wild melon, Lagenaria spherica, also from the Cucurbitaceae. Characteristic leaves there, which help with identification, and you can see the flower too. This is a very common plant. It's a weed. It grows as a low bush called Lantana camara. It has a very, very strong smell to it, and it has berries that attract birds, and therefore it's dispersed quite easily. Lantana camara from the Verbenaceae. And this is another lantana species called bird's brandybush, because also, once again, the berries are attractive to birds. This is Lantana rugosa, also from Verbenaceae, the family Verbenaceae. This is one of the lion's ear species. I believe this is Leonotus leonuris. I stand to be corrected. There are a number of species. They call them lion's ear because you can see the individual florets are kind of like the ears of lions poking out there. They're quite hairy, and also called bushman's tobacco because they used to be smoked by the bushmen. It doesn't have any hallucinogenic effects. It's just kind of smoked in the same way tobacco would be smoked. So Leonotus leonuris. Leonotus leonuris means lion ear, lion tail, and I think lion tail might possibly refer to the leaf shape as well. From the Lamiaceae or mint family, we have Leucas inflata. These are very, very attractive little flowers. They're white with the little anthers poking out. From the Campanulaceae or bowerflower family is a blue lobelia, Lobelia coronopifolia, typically found in grassland areas. From the Onagraceae, which is the evening primrose family, we have Ludwigia repens, one of the many Ludwigia species. They are spreading weed-like plants that kind of grow in water, and they can cover quite large areas and can almost suffocate a small pond, but they have a characteristic yellow flower. The false mallow, Malvastrum coromandelianum of the Malvaceae, just one of many species of the Hibiscus family. These plants can be used to make cordage. The bark from the plants, the outer bark, makes a very nice cordage. From the sedge family, these are dense flat sedge, Meriscus congestus. This I found in False Bay, KwaZulu-Natal, St. Lucia area, also known as Isimangaliso. Hibiscus again, Melania didyma. I can't say much about this except that the leaves are kind of oblique and yeah, characteristic flower, yellow. This is just a genus, Morea or Dietes. It's an African iris. It's used in a lot of gardens, and there are several species, and I'm not certain of the exact species here. There is one popular species called Dietes iridoides, which it possibly could be, but I don't know for certain. But from the Iridaceae, characteristic flower there of an iris. From the Orchidaceae, the Vained Mystacidium, Mystacidium venosum. This I found in the sand forest. It's very pretty flowers. From the Fabaceae, we have the perennial soybean Neonotonia whitei. This you kind of typically find growing all over, and it has these trifoliate leaves. From the Nymphaeaceae, the blue lotus water lily, Nymphaea nucali. What's really great about these water lilies, it's one of my favorite plants, is that you can, if you get really close to them, which is not always easy since they're often in water, but if you get the opportunity, you should try to smell them. It's got a wonderful fragrance, although I have noticed that there are one or two species that I have smelled that didn't have any fragrance. So but most of them have are very fragrant, and so they're wonderful flowers, and they have the typical floating leaf of an aquatic plant. Lamiaceae, once again, the mint family. This is a wild basil or American basil, Ocimum americanum. This particular plant I found on the side of a road, a dirt track in Tunden Nature Reserve, up on a hill near an old settlement. From the Fabaceae, we have this really interesting bush, the caterpillar bush, because of the hairy pod that it typically produces. Ormocarpum trichocarpum, very, very interesting little bush. It never grows very big. It's usually 1.5 to 2 meters high, and it's got a very, very thick bark, corky kind of bark, but a very, very interesting little garden plant if you like indigenous plants. From the Oxalidaceae are several wild sorrel species of different colors. I'm not obviously certain of all the species here except for the middle one, which is Oxalis smithiana. Parthenium narcissiflorum is one of the most problematic weeds that we have in southern Africa. It grows in disturbed areas such as farm areas on fallow land, and along roadsides, etc., where there have been roadworks. It grows out of control, and it does cause a lot of allergy problems for people. From the daisy family, Asteraceae. From the Rubiaceae or Gardenia family, bride's bush, Pavita catophylla. There are several species, and you can see why it's called the bride's bush, because it's kind of like a bride's bouquet when it flowers. Definitely a lovely example of the Rubiaceae. Incidentally, the Rubiaceae is a family that is very well represented in African rainforests in the Congo Basin. The Apocynaceae, this is the oleander family. This is a trellis vine, Pergularia demia, and you typically find it growing either on fences or on bushes. This is a sawtooth frog fruit or turkey tangle from North America, Phylonodiflora, and it's a very, very low growing plant. It kind of likes to grow on lawns and also wet, fairly wet areas. It forms a kind of ground cover. Phylonodiflora of the Verbenaceae. This is a Plectranthus species, Plectranthus ecloni, a tall spur flower from the Labiaceae or mint family. There is a Plectranthus species, I think it's Plectranthus madagascariensis, which smells a little bit like licorice. I remember driving over it as a wildlife guide in the bush, you know, following a leopard or whatever, and smelling that. So a really, really interesting group of plants. This is Plectranthus hardiensis. It's called a hairy coleus, and it's another one I found at Thunder Reserve. The false turkey berry, Plectroniella armata, is very characteristic. If you look at the thorns on the top left picture and also in the right hand picture, it's got very, very long spines, and they kind of come from the same point at a node, with 2 or 3 spines at each node, and the fruit, I believe, is edible, from the Rubiaceae or Gardenia family. Picosepalus calicariensis is one of the parasitic plants from the Loranthaceae, and it has those typical flowers that one would expect. Picosepalus has these kind of bent flowers. You can see how they kind of curve, so very, very characteristic. Typically occur in acacias, albizias, and plants like that. Dicrostachys as well, the sickle bush. From the Polygalaceae, we have these distinctive flowers. This is one species of the Milcourt family, so I'm not certain of the identification once again, but you can see these typical brush-like anthers that form in the flower, and very characteristic of the species. Obviously, differences would be, they would be identified by the color of the flowers, the relative size of the flowers, and also the shape of the leaves. This particular plant has very linear or needle-like leaves. Here's an identified species of Polygala amatimbica, low growing, different leaf shape, trifoliate, of course. Well, no, it appears trifoliate. I don't think it's trifoliate, but anyway, it's simple leaves, and this is a much more dark purple colored flower and very low growing. This is another milkwood species. Once again, not certain, but it's nonetheless a very attractive little bush. And once again, another species that I've found. So all different leaf shapes, and slightly different colors of the flowers, and flower structures slightly different in each species. This is a heartleaf Velvet Bur, Priva cordifolia. It's a low-growing weed, and typically find it, when I say a weed, it's a pioneer plant, and typically find it in disturbed areas with little white flowers. And finally, in this video, Amaranthaceae, the forest burr, Pupalia lupacea. You see these burrs that grow on the plant, and obviously they will get stuck in the fur of animals or in one's socks or on clothing, and get dispersed that way. Thank you for watching the Wilderness channel. Please like and subscribe for similar content.